The first RPG ripped the yard apart. Flames, steel, blood everywhere. Falcon Team was cornered, pinned under 3 angles of fire, their captain's voice breaking. Mayday, Mayday, no answer, no rescue, death closing in. And then it happened. One thunderous rifle shot cut through the storm, dropping an enemy sniper with godlike precision. Who was she? Why did a single woman, hidden in the tempest, decide the fate of 12 elite operators? And how could every bullet hit with such perfection it felt supernatural? This is the untold story of the Storm Sniper, and trust me, you won't forget it. Comment where you're watching from, smash subscribe to VeteranBiker, and let's uncover the legend together. Let's check in. 1 for first-time viewer, 2 if you've seen a few, 3 if you never miss. The first detonation didn't just shake the steel yard, it ripped it apart like the fist of an angry god. Rusted beams and jagged slabs of concrete blasted outward in a storm of shrapnel, clanging and sparking as they tore through the downpour. Falcon Team hit the ground hard, formation shattered, just as another rocket screamed across the open lot. The warhead struck a container, the explosion hurling one operator into its side with a crack that seemed to split bone from marrow. Above, the sky convulsed in fury, clouds churning grey and white like a vast ocean breaking itself against the wind. Mayday! Mayday! Captain Hayes bellowed into his comms, voice shredded by the storm, drowned in static and gunfire. No answer came. Only the pitiless roar of rain on corrugated roofs and the hammering percussion of incoming rounds. The storm gave no quarter. It swallowed their cries whole. Copper-jacketed rounds shredded the frame shielding Hayes, sparks spitting in every direction as metal turned molten under the onslaught. Falcon Team was pinned inside a steel graveyard, every elevated angle spitting death down upon them. Heavy guns erupted from the second floor of a warehouse. From the silo tower, a sniper's muzzle flare pulsed like a cursed beacon, each blink another nail driven into the team's chances of survival. What had begun as a clean sweep for intelligence had detonated into pure hell. A perfect kill box, sprung without mercy. Petty Officer Dunn clutched his bleeding arm, his breath shallow, eyes glassy under the green wash of his optics. Johnson's return fire rattled uselessly off barricaded windows, swallowed by steel. Then another rocket tore across the yard, slamming into a forklift with a blast that turned the machine into a burning torch. Flames roared upward, rain hissing against the inferno. Falcon Team pressed lower into the sludge and smoke, lungs filling with the poison mix of salt air and gunpowder. They were seasoned men, veterans of deserts, mountains, and jungles. But here, in this industrial labyrinth battered by wind and water, their skill felt useless. Hayes keyed his radio again, shouting, "Falcon Team under heavy contact, requesting immediate support." Nothing answered but static and the scream of another machine gun burst. Pinned down, bleeding and nearly out of options, the team braced for the inevitable. Then, through the storm, a sound cut different from the rest, louder than thunder, sharper than any weapon they carried. A rifle report that didn't belong to either side inside that yard. One crack, singular and clean. On the warehouse balcony, the enemy sniper jerked violently, his rifle clattering against metal before his body folded and vanished from sight. The sudden silence from that perch was deafening. Falcon Team exchanged quick, confused glances. None of them had fired that shot. Hayes blinked water from his eyes, searching the storm-smeared skyline. What the hell? But there was no time to marvel. The gunfire from the opposite flank rose in a furious storm of its own, insurgents trying to close the net before the mysterious shot tilted the balance further. "Keep your heads down," Hayes barked, but his voice carried a new edge, because in that instant he knew someone unseen was out there. Someone was watching. Another blast of thunder rolled overhead. Almost masked within it, a second rifle crack answered. This time, one of the RPG gunners, perched on scaffolding, collapsed backward. The launcher tumbled from his arms, clanging down the structure as his partner scrambled away in panic. Falcon Team inhaled collectively, hope threading into their fear. They still didn't know who was out there, but they understood one thing: they weren't alone anymore. Dunn, pale but conscious, hissed between clenched teeth. That wasn't luck. That's a pro. Hayes didn't argue. He only raised his rifle, using the moment of reprieve to shift his men tighter into cover. "Whoever you are," he muttered under his breath, "don't stop." The storm intensified, sheets of rain hammering the yards so hard the ground itself seemed to tremble. Lightning split the sky, bathing the battlefield in strobing white light. For a heartbeat, every figure, friend and foe, was thrown into stark silhouette. Hayes glimpsed the silhouettes of at least a dozen insurgents repositioning behind derelict machinery, and then darkness swept back in, followed by the answering roar of gunfire. But amid the chaos, that other rifle spoke again. One shot, machine gun nest silenced. Another, spotter on the roof pitched forward, face first into corrugated steel. Each impact echoed with surgical certainty. Whoever held that rifle knew this field better than anyone on it, and still, Hayes couldn't see where the rounds were coming from. Not from ground level, not from the flanks, not from any perch he could identify. It was as if the storm itself had decided to even the odds. For Falcon Team, the battle had shifted. They still bled, still fought, but the tide no longer pushed only one way. The unknown shooter was cutting threads in the enemy's web, unraveling the ambush piece by piece. Then came the moment that burned itself into every survivor's memory. An enemy squad advanced boldly across the open concrete, their confidence rooted in the overwhelming firepower they thought they commanded. They shouted orders through the rain, waving others forward. Hayes raised his carbine, finger tightening on the trigger, only to freeze as the lead fighter suddenly jerked sideways, his chest ripped apart. Another dropped, and another. In the span of 5 heartbeats, 5 men fell, each strike precise, final, unstoppable. The survivors broke, scattering into the maze of half-toppled structures, fear overtaking discipline. For Falcon Team, adrenaline surged back. They weren't winning, not yet, but they weren't dying without hope either. "Push left," Hayes barked. "We've got cover fire. Move!" The operators shifted positions, dragging the wounded with them, slipping across puddles and rubble as the unseen guardian continued cutting through the storm. Each new shot came with uncanny timing, just when an enemy muzzle found line of sight, just before another RPG could ignite the yard again. Johnson, wide-eyed, muttered as he reloaded, "It's like they can see everything." No one answered. They were too busy surviving, clinging to the fragile lifeline provided by a phantom marksman whose name they didn't know. The rain poured harder, drowning out the smell of smoke but replacing it with the iron tang of blood washing across concrete. The storm raged, but so did Falcon Team's fight to live another minute. And overhead, somewhere beyond their vision, Raquel Morales exhaled slowly, finger resetting against the trigger. She had just begun. The storm had not yet broken when Raquel Morales sat alone in the narrow confines of her quarters. The walls were bare metal, painted the same dull grey as every other room in the forward base. A single lamp cast a cone of light over her desk, where sheets of notepaper lay covered in numbers and neat diagrams. She dragged her pencil through one final calculation, marking the page with wind vectors and barometric pressure readings. Beyond the thin window, waves struck the rocky shoreline with relentless fury, each crash echoing up into the cliffs where the base stood. Her Barrett rifle rested against the corner, gleaming faintly despite the humidity. To anyone else it was excessive, an indulgence she had no real reason to carry. After all, her official assignment was logistics, tracking ammunition shipments, stamping requisition forms, balancing stock numbers. The rest of Falcon Team treated her presence as a background detail, a clerk moving paperwork. But Raquel lived for something else. The rifle wasn't a burden, it was an extension of her breath, the proof of every hour she had chosen to spend honing skill instead of joining card games or idle chatter. That morning she had overheard the laughter again. One operator leaned at her supply window, grinning with false friendliness. "Got any pencils that shoot straighter than you, Morales?" he joked, his friends chuckling behind him. She'd slid the requested magazines across the counter without reaction, eyes calm, voice neutral. The moment passed like so many before, yet inside her chest something coiled tighter each time the joke returned. Respect could not be asked for, it had to be seized, forged, proven under fire. She knew it, and now as the sky grew darker, the storm swelling with dangerous promise, her instincts screamed that tonight would demand exactly that. The loudspeakers crackled across the base, carrying the clipped voice of the operations officer. Weather deteriorating, winds building past safe limits, non-essential patrols cancelled, but essential missions would continue. And one of those missions belonged to Falcon Team: sweep the steel port, intercept high-value enemy targets. 12 men, armored vehicles, heavy firepower. They didn't need her, at least not in their eyes. But she knew better. She'd studied the maps, memorized the layout of the warehouses, noted the blind alleys and the stacked containers that created kill zones. Her pulse quickened as she pictured it. Storm howling, visibility cut to nothing, echoes bouncing off metal so that direction itself would become a lie. Elite as they were, Falcon Team was walking into a trap. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling as rain began tapping harder on the tin roof overhead. For a long moment she considered staying put, doing her job exactly as written. But the thought of those men being torn apart in a place she had already walked 100 times in her imagination, no. Her hand tightened into a fist. She would not sit here counting bullets on a spreadsheet while warriors bled. Her decision was made in silence. She rose, unzipping the heavy case beside her bunk. Piece by piece, she checked her weapon. Barrel clean, scope adjusted to the last detail. Bipod firm, action smooth. She lifted the rifle with practiced ease. It weighed nearly 30 pounds, but to her body it felt as natural as a pack slung over a shoulder. Next came the ghillie suit, already damp from the coastal air. She shook it once, then rolled it tightly into her pack. Ammunition followed, carefully chosen rounds, each one she had prepared days earlier, wiped, inspected, loaded into her magazines. She counted them quickly, not aloud but in rhythm with her breath. Enough. Outside, the base shifted into routine chaos. Trucks rumbled, soldiers jogged to stations, the storm's rising winds turning every shouted order into a blur. No one noticed as Raquel slipped through the maintenance exit at the rear of the compound. The guard on duty had gone inside to escape the rain. The moment was perfect. Water hit her face like cold needles as she stepped into the storm. She drew her hood tighter, rifle secured across her shoulders, and started toward the ridgeline that paralleled the industrial zone. While Falcon Team rolled out in armored vehicles along the main road, she would climb. From the high ground she could see everything, and from there she could kill. The trail was treacherous, rocks slicked with moss, mud sucking at her boots, wind tugging hard at her pack. Lightning flashed, illuminating twisted shapes of machinery dumped decades ago, their hulks half buried in sand and weeds. But she pressed forward, her stride steady, balanced by years of conditioning. Each step was chosen, each handhold deliberate. She moved like someone who had practiced this path every night in her mind. Halfway up, gusts nearly knocked her from her footing. She crouched low, gripping stone until her fingers ached. Around her, rain sheeted sideways, transforming the landscape into a blur of grey. She forced herself onward, jaw tight. She thought of the men already en route, unaware of the snare waiting. Every second counted. At last, she reached the crest. From there, the coastline stretched jagged below, waves foaming white against black rock. In the distance, the port rose like a scar. Warehouses slanted, cranes frozen in place, stacks of containers leaning against each other in precarious towers. Even through the storm, the place radiated menace. Raquel knelt, lowering her pack, assembling the Barrett with methodical precision, bolt-locked, scope-mounted, bipod legs extended. She wiped condensation from the lens with the corner of her sleeve. Then she lay prone, tucking the rifle into her shoulder, the metal cool against her cheek. Her heartbeat slowed. Through the scope, the world sharpened. Despite the storm, she could see the armored convoy below, headlights flickering as Falcon Team pushed toward the yard. She could also see shadows slipping into position around the warehouses, insurgents waiting like hunters, rifles ready. Her gut twisted. The ambush was perfect, and she was the only one who knew. Her breath fogged the eyepiece for an instant before she adjusted. She centered crosshairs on the rooftop opposite, where she'd already marked a likely sniper hide. Empty for now, but not for long. She shifted to another window, noting the faint glimmer of glass, the telltale movement of a barrel sliding into place. The trap was sprung. Raquel exhaled slowly, her trigger finger brushing metal. She could already hear the muffled thunder of distant RPGs being prepared, could already see Falcon Team advancing blind. Her decision to leave the base was vindicated in the most brutal way. If she hadn't come, they would have been slaughtered before the first minute ended. She pressed her cheek tighter to the stock. The storm screamed, but inside her mind, stillness reigned. Angles, distances, drift, all aligned like puzzle pieces only she could see. She wasn't here to prove herself anymore. She was here to keep men alive, whether they knew her name or not. The first target entered her sights. Her breath slowed to a near stop. In the chaos of the storm, she was ready to strike. Rain hammered the derelict rooftops of the steel port, each drop drumming against twisted metal until the entire yard seemed alive with noise. Falcon Team was already in motion below, filing into the open lanes between stacked containers, their boots splashed through deepening puddles, weapons raised, night vision optics cutting through the dim haze of daylight smothered by storm clouds. They moved with practiced discipline, but Raquel Morales could see what they could not. Dozens of shapes slipping through doorways and broken windows, rifles angled, patience measured in trigger squeezes. From her prone position atop a collapsed warehouse roof, Raquel pressed her body flat into rust flakes and wet tar paper. The Barrett's bipod sank slightly into softened wood beneath her, but she adjusted until the rifle felt like part of the structure itself. She tugged her hood lower against the sideways rain, blinked water from her lashes, and fixed her eye to the scope. Through that circle of clarity, the battlefield transformed. Every flash of lightning revealed a new detail, the glint of a barrel hidden in shadows, the nervous shuffle of boots behind broken machinery, the faint wave of a signal between two insurgents across the yard. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. To Raquel, it was a map of intent. The convoy had halted. Falcon Team dismounted, Captain Hayes signaling, hand gestures sharp and efficient. They were wary but not wary enough. Their line of sight was choked by containers, their flanks exposed to every high window. Raquel's pulse drummed steady, not from fear but from recognition. This was the moment she had anticipated when she left her barracks. This was why she had risked everything. A sudden streak of fire carved across the yard, the first RPG. It detonated against a forklift, showering the team in fragments. Men dove for cover. Enemy rifles erupted in chorus, muzzle flashes strobing through the sheets of rain. Bullets whined off steel, sparking against wet concrete. The trap had sprung with precision. Raquel did not flinch. Her crosshairs had already found the shooter crouched on a scaffolding. The man's launcher smoked from the recent discharge, his hands fumbling for another round. She exhaled, the storm vanishing from her awareness, leaving only math and certainty. The trigger broke. The Barrett roared, a sound so massive it seemed to silence the storm for an instant. The insurgent folded backward, the RPG clattering uselessly to the floor below. Falcon Team flinched at the sudden boom echoing overhead. Some looked skyward, confusion etched into their soaked faces. Hayes barked an order, dragging their attention back to the fight. They didn't know where the shot had come from, but it had bought them precious seconds. Raquel cycled the bolt with smooth economy, chambering her next round. She shifted aim, scanning the second warehouse. A glimmer of scope reflection betrayed the sniper aiming at Falcon's medic. Too late for him. Perfect timing for her. She adjusted for crosswind, squeezed, and sent steel screaming through storm and concrete alike. The enemy's weapon clattered to the floor as his body slumped lifeless against a shattered frame. Below, the medic froze, realizing he'd just been spared. He pressed back against cover, adrenaline carving a new edge into his focus. The yard erupted further as insurgents pressed their advantage, pouring fire from 3 directions. Falcon operators returned bursts, but their angles were weak. A machine gun opened up from the 3rd building, its belt-fed chatter tearing holes into containers where men crouched. Sparks rained, shrapnel hissed. Raquel rolled slightly, sighting higher on the structure. Through a shattered gap in corrugated iron, she caught the rhythm of movement, the gunner's shoulder shifting as he pivoted left, a narrow vulnerability between steel plating. She steadied her breath. Lightning flared, painting the yard silver. She fired. The round ripped through the 6-inch gap, smashing into the exposed flesh. The gunner spasmed, collapsing sideways, his weapon clattering silent. Falcon Team moved instantly, seizing the gap. "Shift left!" Hayes shouted, his voice rough but commanding. The men scrambled, dragging the wounded across slick pavement, repositioning under their unseen guardian's cover. From her vantage, Raquel watched their discipline reassert itself. They were elite, but even the best required windows of survival. She would give them every second she could. Another squad of insurgents rushed forward, emboldened by numbers. They darted between rusted vehicles, firing wild into the storm. Raquel tracked them one by one, her finger steady, her timing exact. Crack! The leader dropped. Crack! The one carrying the grenade launcher crumpled against the wall. Crack! Another fell, clutching his chest. Panic rippled through the survivors, their momentum shattered. Through the storm's roar, she caught glimpses of Falcon operators pushing forward. They weren't winning yet, but the ambush had lost its precision. The enemy had expected helpless prey. Instead, they now faced prey with a hidden fang. Raquel's cheek pressed harder against the stock, her muscles rigid but controlled. Every shot she took was one she had rehearsed in silence, long hours lying still, listening to her heartbeat, practicing until the world beyond the crosshairs no longer existed. Out here, under lightning and fury, it was no different. She paused to reload, hands moving automatically despite the rain that tried to slip the magazine from her grip. 10 fresh rounds clicked into place. She slid the bolt home, exhaled once more. The storm was her ally now. Its thunder masked her rifle's thunder. Its flashes cloaked her muzzle flare. Falcon Team regrouped, Wounded clustered in the center as others fanned out to cover them. Hayes raised his radio again, desperation roar. "This is Falcon Team. We are pinned, heavy casualties requesting extraction. Any station respond." Only static hissed back. Raquel heard it through the echo of the yard, that hopeless hiss, and it stoked her resolve. She didn't need to answer. Her rifle would speak for her. Another enemy sniper revealed himself with a careless muzzle flash from Building 1. Raquel didn't hesitate. She adjusted for the angle, compensated for wind drift, and pressed the trigger. The man fell before he ever chambered his next round. The balance shifted further. Confusion spread among the attackers. Their tight formation unraveled as fear dug deeper than orders. And still, Raquel kept firing. Not as vengeance, not for recognition, but with singular focus. Hold the line until Falcon Team could breathe again. Her barrel steamed in the rain, water sizzling off hot steel. Her face was slick, her hair plastered against her hood. The storm roared without mercy, but inside her scope the world remained calm, clinical, exact. Below, Hayes risked a glance upward again, scanning the rooftops. He saw nothing but rain and shadows. Yet the bodies piling among the enemy ranks told him all he needed. Someone was out there, unseen, saving them. He clenched his jaw, whispered words none of his men could hear. "Whoever you are, keep going." Raquel blinked against water streaming down her face, her eye never leaving the crosshairs. She could not hear his words, but she didn't need to. She knew the fight was far from over, but she had declared herself, not in name, not in voice, but in thunder, and the storm answered. The yard looked like a battlefield sculpted by gods who preferred chaos. Fire still licked at the ruins of the forklift, casting flickering light against walls streaked black by smoke. Puddles shimmered red under the storm as rain mingled with blood, spreading thin rivers across broken pavement. Falcon Team crouched in scattered cover, eyes wide and weapons clenched, their uniforms soaked to the skin. Each man wore the exhaustion of the last minutes in his expression, yet each still moved with the instinct of warriors refusing to fold. From her vantage above, Raquel Morales saw everything. The Barrett rested steady against her shoulder, its weight a familiar anchor against the storm. Her lungs drew slow, measured breaths, heart steady though her ears rang with the aftershock of her last shot. Through the scope she scanned the battlefield again. The enemy had faltered but not broken. Their commanders were sharp, veterans who wouldn't crumble simply because the ambush had been disrupted. Inside the skeletal remains of Building 2, movement stirred. A new machine gun was being dragged toward a shattered window. She spotted two insurgents working together, one hoisting the weapon, the other carrying its belt of ammunition. Their intent was clear: re-establish dominance, pin Falcon Team until every route of escape closed. Raquel's finger curled, her sight locked. The loader adjusted the bipod, his profile illuminated briefly by lightning. She didn't fire. Not yet. Patience was her ally. The Barrett could kill instantly, but timing determined victory. She watched, calculating the rhythm of their setup. The gunner leaned into position, turning his shoulder slightly. That was the gap. Her breath slipped away in a single slow stream. She pressed the trigger. The Barrett's thunder rolled, echoing across the yard. The gunner lurched sideways, lifeless, before he even knew he'd been targeted. The assistant froze, eyes wide, then scrambled for cover, abandoning the heavy weapon. Below, Hayes seized the moment. "Move now! Shift positions!" His shout cut through storm and static. Falcon operators broke from their battered cover, dashing through rain-slick lanes, dragging their wounded with them. For the first time since the ambush began, their momentum belonged to them. Raquel cycled the bolt, chambering fresh death. Her scope swept left. More shadows moved between rusted tanks and skeletal cranes. The insurgents were trying to flank, pushing through side corridors of the complex. She tracked their approach, her crosshairs brushing past one chest, then another. She squeezed twice in controlled rhythm. Crack! Crack! Two bodies folded into the mud, their rifles clattering against steel. The survivors scattered, shouting orders in panic. Raquel's lips tightened. She could hear no words, but she read desperation in their gestures. The ambush was unraveling, yet discipline still lived among them. From Building 3, a squad of fighters emerged, advancing with coordinated precision. They weren't rushing, they were stalking, rifles steady, boots pounding in unison against the concrete. Veterans, dangerous. Raquel shifted her scope higher, following their path. She knew their tactic. They'd try to reposition to a stronger angle, then hammer Falcon Team from elevation. If they succeeded, the tide would reverse once again. She couldn't allow that. Her eye followed the squad leader, his radio pressed to his ear as he barked commands. She tracked his stride through a second-floor corridor, adjusting for glass distortion where rain streaked across shattered panes. Her trigger broke. The round smashed through, the leader collapsing mid-command. Confusion rippled instantly. One of his men dove to the stairwell, shouting into the radio. Raquel tracked him next, her scope steady. Another squeeze, another fall. Below, Falcon Team pressed forward, emboldened by the invisible ally carving holes through their enemy. Operators fired disciplined bursts, moving from cover to cover, protecting the wounded while advancing toward stronger positions. They didn't waste time questioning who was helping them. Survival mattered more. Hayes stole a glance upward between bursts of gunfire. Rain streamed down his helmet, but he caught sight of muzzle flashes dropping enemy after enemy with unnatural precision. He clenched his jaw. Whoever was up there wasn't just a marksman, they were a savior. Back on the rooftop, Raquel reloaded again, her fingers slick but steady. Spent casings rolled against her arm, washed clean by rain. She tucked the magazine into place, cycled the bolt, and returned her eye to the scope. Suddenly, light bloomed from the far end of the yard. Another RPG team had emerged, this one crouched near the shadow of a toppled crane. She saw the warhead lifted, pointed toward the container line where Falcon's medic was crouched. They had seconds. Raquel's body shifted before thought even caught up. She adjusted elevation, factored the gusting crosswind that bent smoke sideways across the frame. She breathed once, her heartbeat slowing to nothing. She fired. The launcher fell, clattering against stone. The gunner's body twisted violently before collapsing. His partner fled into the storm, abandoning the weapon. Falcon Team erupted forward. Hayes barked commands, his voice edged with fire now. "Advance! Secure the flank!" The operators surged, sweeping through the yard with renewed ferocity. They pulled their wounded behind sturdier cover, establishing a tighter perimeter. Their formation was no longer one of prey, but of soldiers reclaiming their ground. Raquel tracked them, her scope moving with their progress. Every gap in their defense she covered, every enemy daring to expose themselves, she ended. Her world narrowed to the tunnel of glass, rain-smeared crosshairs, and the thunderous punctuation of each trigger pull. But her advantage wasn't absolute. From the corner of her scope, movement flickered on the roof of Building 2, a new machine gun team, faster, more disciplined than the last. They carried their weapon like men who had done this a dozen times. They set it against sandbags, their silhouette partially shielded. Raquel knew she couldn't strike immediately. The angle left only a sliver of flesh, a target too small for certainty in this wind. She waited, patient, her breathing steady despite the urgency gnawing at her chest. Below, Falcon Team shifted again, unknowingly aligning with the gunner's sights. She couldn't miss. The gunner adjusted his weapon, shoulder twisting for stability. The second he turned, the gap appeared. Raquel's finger squeezed. The Barrett bucked, its roar devouring the storm's thunder. The gunner's body snapped back, the belt-fed weapon clattering inert. His assistant screamed, scrambling for the fallen weapon. Raquel didn't hesitate. Her second shot ended his attempt. The rooftop fell silent again. Below, Hayes shouted new orders, guiding his men deeper into cover, closer to an exit. For the first time since the fight began, hope bled into his voice. Raquel exhaled, the taste of wet metal on her tongue. She blinked rain from her lashes, pulled in another slow breath. Her body was exhausted, soaked to the bone, muscles aching from holding the Barrett steady for so long. But fatigue was irrelevant. Her mission was not survival, it was salvation. And as long as Falcon Team drew breath, she would remain invisible in the storm, the unseen hand rewriting their fate. The battle raged on, but the balance had shifted irrevocably. The ambushers, once so certain of victory, now scrambled to hold ground that melted under each crack of her rifle. Their whispers grew frantic, their movements erratic. The trap had been sprung, but it was breaking under the weight of one ghost they had never counted on. Raquel Morales pressed her cheek tighter to the stock, eyes unwavering. The storm screamed around her, but she didn't hear it anymore. All she heard was the silence after each shot, the silence that meant another man lived to fight. And she wasn't finished yet. The air reeked of cordite and wet rust. Smoke curled upward from burning debris, mixing with the storm until the whole yard looked like a vision out of purgatory. Falcon Team huddled behind overturned machinery, checking wounds, swapping quick words that were half orders, half prayers. Each man's face was taut with strain, but there was a new spark in their eyes, something that had been absent only minutes earlier: hope. From her vantage above, Raquel Morales could see that spark ignite. Every second she bought them translated into resolve. The Barrett lay warm against her cheek, its metal radiating the memory of each thunderous round she had sent into the storm. Her shoulder ached from recoil, but she ignored it. Pain was irrelevant, timing was everything. Captain Hayes crouched low, water dripping from the rim of his helmet. His voice cut sharp through the downpour. "We've got a ghost on our side. Use it. Shift to the right flank. Move on my signal." His men nodded, no hesitation. Whatever doubts lingered had drowned in the storm, along with the blood of their enemies. Raquel adjusted her scope. The right flank meant open exposure for several crucial seconds. If Falcon Team tried it alone, they would be shredded. But she had already anticipated this move. Her crosshairs swept across the next choke point, where a trio of insurgents crouched behind a barricade of steel drums. They were waiting, patient, their rifles trained on the exact gap Falcon Team would need to cross. Her breath steadied. She fired once. The lead fighter crumpled. Before his partners could react, two more cracks split the storm. The other bodies toppled like dominoes. The gap was clear. Hayes didn't hesitate. "Now, move!" Falcon Team burst from cover, sprinting through sheets of rain. Boots splashed, weapons raised, wounded carried between shoulders. They reached the opposite line, sliding behind a wall of containers just as more insurgents tried to reposition. Raquel shifted quickly, chambering her next round. Her scope locked onto a figure racing toward an abandoned forklift, carrying something long and cylindrical, another RPG. She adjusted elevation, factored the gust ripping across the port, and fired. The man collapsed, the launcher skidding across the concrete. The impact echoed louder than thunder for the men below. "That's our cue," Hayes growled, signaling his squad to push deeper. Falcon Team advanced. Their discipline resurfaced in sharp bursts of fire, each man covering the next, their movements tight despite exhaustion. They were no longer prey scrambling for survival. They were predators reclaiming ground, guided by an unseen angel. Raquel tracked them, a scope, a shield moving in tandem with their steps. An insurgent lifted from a rooftop, gone before his finger touched the trigger. Another leaned from a window with a machine gun, cut down mid-scream. Each shot cleared a path, weaving a corridor of survival through the labyrinth of steel and rain. Still, the enemy was not broken. She caught sight of new reinforcements pouring in from the far perimeter, slipping through alleys and shattered gates. Their discipline was looser, their firing wild, but their sheer numbers threatened to swamp the field again. Raquel clenched her jaw, focusing. Her magazine was running low. Each remaining round had to count more than ever. She aimed high, tracking one insurgent carrying a radio. His mouth moved, shouting orders into the handset. Her round tore through him, silencing the command before it could spread. The fighters nearest him froze in shock, stumbling into disarray. Falcon Team seized the hesitation. Hayes pushed them forward again, his own rifle barking short, brutal bursts. They cut through the smoke, reaching the partial cover of a collapsed warehouse wall. The advance was costly. One operator went down with a scream, blood pooling fast from a torn leg, but they had broken the choke point. Raquel's pulse quickened. She scanned for the source of that shot and found it. An enemy sniper tucked into the wreckage of a crane cab. His barrel still glistened with rain. She didn't wait. The Barrett thundered, and the sniper folded over the rim of the shattered cab. Below, Falcon's medic pressed into action, dragging the wounded man to relative safety. Hayes crouched beside them, eyes darting upward again. He still saw nothing, only the haze of storm and ruin. But he knew, he could feel, that every impossible reprieve came from the same unseen guardian. The yard convulsed with violence. Gunfire sparked across every wall, echoing off metal until the entire port rang with it. Yet amid the storm, one rhythm remained steady, Raquel's. Crack after crack, precise as clockwork, each one carving the battlefield into a map of survival. She ejected another spent casing, the brass tumbling into rainwater and vanishing. Her magazine was down to its last rounds. She reloaded with swift, practiced movements, the fresh clip slamming into place with a click she felt more than heard. Her eye returned to the scope. Another squad was forming in the distance, crouched low, attempting to regroup behind a barricade of rusted pipes. She didn't need to kill them all, just the leader. Her crosshairs found his temple. One squeeze, one collapse, and the squad dissolved into chaos, retreating rather than advancing. Falcon Team used the lull to secure their wounded tighter, reorganizing lines. Hayes' voice cut again. "We push to extraction point! Keep moving!" The men obeyed. Their breaths came in ragged bursts, their faces slick with rain and grime, but their strides carried a new weight. They believed they might actually leave this place alive. From her rooftop, Raquel felt the faintest tug at her chest. Not pride, not vindication, something quieter, relief. For now they were still breathing. For now her calculations had held true, but the battle wasn't done. At the far end of the port, new muzzle flashes sparked, and another heavy gun barked to life. Raquel's muscles coiled again. She would not let the storm claim them, not while she still had a single round left. The fight surged into its next phase, and Raquel Morales was ready. The storm showed no mercy. Waves pounded the coastline, spray carried inland until the port tasted of brine and blood. Thunder rolled without pause, a constant drumbeat under the metallic shriek of gunfire. Falcon Team had clawed back ground, but their reprieve was fragile, hanging by a thread only Raquel Morales could see. Flat against the ruined roof, Raquel shifted her weight. Hours of training had prepared her body for this, yet even she felt the grind of fatigue in her arms and shoulders. The Barrett pressed into her like an iron burden. Each shot rattled her bones, but her mind remained sharp, sharpened by necessity. If she faltered now, 12 men below would be swallowed by the tide. Through her scope, she scanned the chaos. Falcon Team clustered in the ruins of a warehouse wall, tending to their wounded and preparing to move again. Their faces were grim but determined. They trusted the storm's phantom now. They had no choice. Movement flickered at the far edge of the port. A new wave of fighters was arriving, pushing through the broken gates with the urgency of men desperate to reclaim momentum, dozens of them carrying rifles high against the rain. Unlike the disciplined veterans earlier, these were reckless, driven more by fury than strategy. Yet sheer numbers gave them weight. Raquel adjusted elevation. Her crosshairs found the lead man, a scar slashing across his cheek as he shouted orders. She squeezed. His head snapped back, his body crumpling into the mud. Confusion rippled through the fighters behind him. Some faltered, others surged faster. Below, Captain Hayes seized the opportunity. "Shift fire! Hold them back!" His men rose in unison, rifles barking sharp bursts that cut down the reckless charge. The yard became a storm within a storm, rain and bullets, thunder and fire. Raquel's world narrowed to the glass of her scope. She tracked the next fighter, a man fumbling with a rocket tube. Crack! He dropped. Another, sprinting with a machine gun tripod. Crack! Gone. Her breathing came steady, each exhale aligning with a trigger pull. But the enemy didn't stop. They poured into the yard like floodwater, climbing over their own dead to press closer. Raquel's magazine emptied with brutal speed. She reloaded, her fingers slick but precise, jamming the next clip home. She racked the bolt, aimed again, fired again. The Barrett roared louder than the storm, its voice constant, punishing. Absolute. Down below, Falcon Team fought with renewed ferocity. Johnson covered the left flank, his carbine steady despite a bleeding graze across his temple. Dunn leaned against debris, his wounded arm strapped tight but his pistol barking defiantly. Hayes shouted orders, each word laced with both grit and hope. Still, the wave pushed closer. Raquel's eye caught a squad weaving between containers, using steel walls as cover. They moved with discipline, veterans leading the charge. Her crosshairs followed their leader as he signaled with 2 fingers, preparing to break out into Falcon's blind side. She fired. He dropped instantly, the rest scattered, their coordination splintered. But her relief was fleeting. From the corner of her scope, she saw it, another heavy gun being set on the roof of Building 3. The weapon's silhouette was unmistakable, belt-fed, meant to tear apart squads in seconds. Raquel swung her rifle, adjusting her scope. The gunner's body was shielded, hidden by steel plating. She couldn't strike directly, not yet. Her eye narrowed, watching. Calculating, she remembered the earlier gap, the momentary sliver of flesh when a shoulder shifted. She waited. The gunner leaned. A fraction of a second, but enough. Crack! The shot tore through the gap, the gunner collapsing. The assistant reached for the weapon. Crack! He joined his partner in death. The rooftop fell silent again. Raquel exhaled slowly, though her body screamed for rest. Her muscles trembled under the storm's weight. She forced herself back into rhythm, chambering another round. Falcon Team used the window to advance again, dragging their wounded towards sturdier cover near the southern edge of the yard. Hayes guided them like a conductor, his voice never wavering. They weren't clear yet, but the line between life and death was shifting in their favor. Still, Raquel felt the enemy's determination building like pressure in her chest. They would not relent, not while so many of their dead littered the yard. Revenge burned hotter than tactics now, and vengeance could be even more dangerous. Her scope confirmed it. A squad of 6 fighters was maneuvering through the shell of a warehouse moving toward Falcon's right. She tracked them as they sprinted past shattered beams and broken machinery. She fired 3 times. 3 bodies hit the floor. The survivors dove for cover, terrified, pinned. Her magazine emptied again. She reloaded with grim efficiency. Brass casings pooled around her, glistening in the storm. 18 rounds already fired, 18 lives stolen from the enemy, 18 moments bought for the men below. A shout erupted from Falcon's position, Hayes ordering movement. They were making for the extraction point, pushing hard through the storm. Raquel adjusted her scope, covering their path. She scanned every rooftop, every window, every corner where death could hide, and death was waiting. Another RPG team scrambled into position just 20 meters ahead of Falcon's path. Their launcher rose, angled at the moving operators. Raquel's body moved before thought caught up. She aligned her crosshairs, squeezed. Crack! The gunner fell, the launcher clattering to the floor. His partner reached for it. Crack! He followed. The path was clear again. Falcon Team surged forward, hearts hammering, breaths ragged. Hayes glanced skyward once more, rain dripping from his jawline. His lips moved silently. Thank you. Raquel couldn't see it. She didn't need to. Her chest burned. Her arms shook, but she refused to yield. The storm howled around her, a symphony of fury, but inside the circle of her scope, clarity reigned. Every shot mattered, every life mattered. She would not stop. The enemy tried again, rallying behind screams of rage. But for each fighter who dared show himself, Raquel's rifle answered. Crack, crack, crack! The Barrett sang through the tempest, drowning vengeance in precision. Below, Falcon Team pressed on, step by brutal step, their survival carved from the storm by one invisible hand. And high above, Raquel Morales endured, a lone figure against the tempest, her will stronger than thunder, her aim sharper than lightning. The battle had not ended, but the tide had turned. The storm had grown vicious, as if the heavens themselves sought to erase everything in the port below. Rain poured in violent sheets, bouncing off steel containers and pooling into wide black lakes. Thunder pounded so close it rattled the bones, each boom folding into the crack of gunfire until both sounds became indistinguishable. Falcon Team struggled forward, battered but alive. Their boots slapped against soaked concrete, dragging the wounded through a gauntlet of smoke and shrapnel. They were close now. Hayes knew the extraction zone lay less than half a kilometer beyond the southern wall, but every step forward carried the taste of danger. And above them, Raquel Morales lay flat against twisted corrugated steel, her cheek pressed to the damp stock of the Barrett. Her eyes burned from staring through rain and scope for so long, but she refused to blink for more than a heartbeat. Exhaustion gnawed at her arms and lower back. The storm had soaked her to the skin, chilled her muscles, but nothing could unsteady her aim. Not yet. Her scope revealed the next threat, insurgents climbing the roofline opposite Falcon's advance, hauling a heavy weapon between them. It wasn't another rifle, but something worse. A mounted gun designed to sweep open ground like a scythe. If they set it, Falcon Team would be shredded before they ever reached the wall. Raquel steadied her breathing. The distance was long even for her, and the wind gusted unpredictably, throwing sheets of rain sideways. The first man dropped the tripod, adjusting its legs against the parapet. The second lifted the barrel into place. She couldn't wait. Her fingers squeezed. The Barrett roared, recoil thundering into her shoulder. The loader collapsed, the barrel crashing against the roof. The gunner shouted, scrambling to keep the weapon upright. Raquel adjusted a fraction, fired again. The second round tore him backward, his body flipping over the ledge. The weapon tumbled uselessly into the courtyard below. Falcon Team moved instantly, seizing the opening. Hayes bellowed, "Push forward!" The men surged through the gap, rifles spitting fire into doorways where insurgents tried desperately to regroup, but the enemy was far from finished. From the corner of her scope, Raquel spotted movement on the southern perimeter. Fresh fighters emerging from a side alley, crouched low, advancing in pairs. Their numbers were smaller than the first waves, but their determination radiated through every step. They weren't rushing blindly, they were hunting. She tracked the lead pair. Crack, one fell. Crack, the second joined him. Yet more kept coming, using the rain as cover, darting between shadows. Below, Falcon Team pressed on, bullets sparking against containers as they sprinted from one ruined barricade to the next. Johnson covered the rear, his rifle barking despite the blood trickling from a new wound across his cheek. Dunn stumbled, nearly collapsing, but two teammates hooked arms under him, hauling him forward. They would not leave anyone behind. Raquel shifted aim again, her eyes narrowing. Her body screamed for rest, every muscle raw, but she forced herself to remain steady. She spotted an enemy crawling onto the roof of a warehouse, dragging an RPG tube over his shoulder. He crouched, bracing it against his knee, aiming directly at Hayes's position. Raquel's breath vanished. She adjusted, calculating wind and distance in an instant. The trigger broke. The Barrett's voice drowned the storm. The rocketeer's body jerked violently, the warhead tumbling harmlessly to the ground. Hayes shouted into his radio again, though he knew no help was coming. "Keep moving! We're almost clear!" But as if the storm itself conspired against them, the final threat revealed itself. Across the courtyard, on the roof of Building 3, a squad of 5 insurgents emerged together. They carried another belt-fed machine gun, heavier than any before, mounted quickly against sandbags. Lightning flashed, revealing their determined faces, rainwater streaming from their brows. They opened fire instantly, a hail of rounds screaming across the yard. Bullets ripped through the air, chewing into concrete, sparking against steel. One operator fell with a cry, clutching his thigh. Another was slammed backward, armor dented but intact. The rest dove for cover, pinned, momentum shattered. Raquel's heart hammered. She knew this was it, the moment that decided whether Falcon Team lived or died. She recentered her scope on the gun nest. The gunner's body was shielded by steel. She could only see fragments of his shoulder and helmet as he pivoted left and right. She steadied her breath, waiting for the pattern. Each time he shifted left, that sliver of vulnerability appeared. Each time it lasted no more than a heartbeat. Her magazine was almost empty. Only one round remained. She closed her eyes for half a second, hearing the storm, feeling the gusts tug against her wet hood, counting the rhythm of thunder. When she opened them, her world narrowed to a single target, a single chance. The gunner leaned left. Raquel squeezed. The rifle bucked. The round screamed through the rain, slicing wind and storm, finding the gap. The gunner collapsed, the weapon's belt unraveling in a useless cascade of brass. His assistant screamed, lunging forward to grab the weapon, but Falcon Team, seizing the split second of silence, opened fire in unison. Their rounds tore through the remaining insurgents, silencing the rooftop for good. The yard fell quieter, still filled with rain, thunder, and the moans of the wounded, but quieter. The heaviest guns were gone. The ambush was broken. Hayes rose from cover, voice fierce despite exhaustion. "We move now! Extraction point! Go!" His men obeyed, dragging their injured, supporting each other, every step carrying them closer to survival. Raquel lowered her cheek from the stock, blinking rain from her burning eyes. She'd fired every round she'd prepared. Brass casings littered the rooftop around her, gleaming like relics in the storm. Her arms trembled as she broke down the Barrett, sliding its pieces back into her pack with practiced speed. No trace would remain. From below, Falcon Team pushed through the southern gate, disappearing into the curtain of rain. Raquel watched until the last shadow vanished. Only then did she allow herself a slow breath. Relief mingled with fatigue, heavier than the rifle she carried. The storm raged on, indifferent. But 12 men lived because of her, and as she slipped silently from the rooftop, Raquel Morales became a ghost once more. The storm did not relent, even as Falcon Team broke through the southern gate. The rain fell heavier, hammering against their helmets and weapons until every step felt like dragging through an ocean. The port's skeletal structures faded behind them, swallowed by mist and smoke, yet every man carried its weight in his lungs and the ringing in his ears. Captain Hayes led from the front, rifle tucked into his shoulder, voice raw from shouting orders through thunder. He guided his men into the ruined streets beyond the yard, weaving them between gutted warehouses toward the designated extraction zone. Behind him, Johnson staggered with a wounded operator slung across his back, his face pale but his eyes burning with refusal to quit. Dunn limped along, supported by 2 teammates, jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone. They were alive, bloodied, battered, nearly spent, but alive. And all of them knew it wasn't just because of their own skill. Above, unseen among the shattered rooftops, Raquel Morales disassembled the Barrett piece by piece. Her fingers shook from cold and fatigue, but her movements remained efficient. The barrel slid into its case, the scope packed carefully, the bipod folded tight. She scooped the last of the spent brass into her pouch, leaving nothing to betray her presence except the faint dents pressed into the rain-slick rooftop. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, though her muscles screamed for rest. She'd been locked to that rifle for what felt like hours, her body becoming little more than an anchor for precision. Now that the shots were done, the silence pressed against her ears with almost unbearable weight. She hoisted the pack over her shoulder, the familiar heaviness returning, and slid back from the rooftop. Her boots found slick purchase on broken beams as she lowered herself into the shadows of the ruined factory below. Every movement was deliberate, careful not to echo against the storm. Falcon Team had their path. Her work was finished. But her mission wasn't survival, it was disappearance. She navigated the skeletal corridors of the factory, weaving through corridors littered with rust and puddles. Her hood clung heavy to her head, water dripping down her face. At one point she paused, listening. Shouts echoed faintly from the distance, enemy voices, frantic, confused. They hadn't yet understood what had happened, only that their ambush had collapsed in ways they could not explain. Some believed reinforcements had arrived, others swore they had fought ghosts. Raquel's lips pressed tight. Let them argue. The truth wasn't theirs to hold. She emerged into a collapsed stairwell, climbing carefully until she reached ground level. The air outside reeked of gunpowder and seawater. Fires still burned in places, orange glow flickering through the downpour. She moved quickly, hugging shadows, her silhouette merging with debris. She was not here to be seen. At the southern edge of the port, Falcon Team had reached the extraction zone, a stretch of broken roadway wide enough for helicopters to land. They formed a defensive circle, weapons outward, wounded at the center. Hayes keyed his radio again, voice hoarse. "This is Falcon Team. Multiple wounded, mission compromised, requesting immediate extraction at Grid 95 Alpha. I say again, requesting immediate extraction." Static swallowed most of his words, but this time faint acknowledgement crackled back. The storm had shifted just enough to let the signal bleed through. Hayes' shoulders sagged with a mix of relief and dread. They only had to hold a little longer. Minutes dragged like hours. Enemy fire probed at their perimeter, sporadic shots from fighters too frightened to commit to another full assault. Falcon Team responded with sharp bursts, conserving what ammunition remained. They were frayed to their last threads, but their line held. Then the sound arrived, the low thrum of rotor blades barely audible beneath the storm's roar. The men lifted their heads, hope flickering again. Shadows grew against the clouds, and then two black hawks descended through the rain, their rotors chopping sheets of water into mist. Searchlights cut across the broken ground, illuminating the battered silhouettes of Falcon Team. The helicopters touched down hard, their skids splashing into the flooded pavement, doors slid open, medics spilling out under fire. Hayes barked commands, his men hauling the wounded aboard with practiced urgency. Rounds sparked against the hull, but the Bird's gunners answered in kind, suppressing distant muzzle flashes. One by one, Falcon Team loaded in until only Hayes remained on the ground. He scanned the yard one final time, rain streaming down his face, then climbed aboard the nearest Bird. As the helicopter lifted, the port receded below, twisted steel, burning wreckage, bodies scattered like broken chess pieces. Hayes sat in the doorway, hand gripping the frame, eyes locked on the battlefield shrinking beneath them. His mind replayed every impossible shot, every life spared by thunder that hadn't come from the sky. He didn't know who would save them, but he knew they would all be dead without her. Far from the extraction zone, Raquel watched the helicopters rise through the curtain of rain. She stood on the ridgeline she had climbed hours earlier, her pack heavy but secure, her body aching with exhaustion. The rotor's glow reflected briefly in her dark eyes. She allowed herself a small breath of satisfaction, then turned away. The ridge carried her back toward the base, her boots sinking into mud, each step deliberate. She blended into the storm as if she had always been part of it, another shadow lost to wind and water. Hours later, the forward base buzzed with whispers. Word had spread before the helicopters even touched down. Falcon Team had been ambushed by overwhelming numbers, their extraction nearly cut off. Yet they had returned, bloodied but alive, and not by their own fire alone. Sniper fire, one operator muttered in the mess hall, his voice low but urgent. Precise, 18 bodies minimum, all long-range kills. Another leaned in. Delta Force? Maybe CIA SOG? A Marine shook his head. No, I've seen Delta work. This was different, too clean, too perfect. Theories multiplied like sparks from an engine, each man insisting he had the truth. None of them were right. 3 decks below, in the logistics office, Raquel Morales typed quietly at her computer. Her hair was still damp, tucked back in a neat braid. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly as she entered numbers into the inventory system. 7.62 millimeters NATO, 5.56 millimeters 50 caliber. She noted 18 rounds expended from her ledger, her fingers gliding across the keys. The paperwork was flawless. She heard footsteps approach. Looking up, she saw Petty Officer Johnson, bandaged, pale, but standing. He leaned against her window, eyes studying her face carefully. "Staff Sergeant," he said softly. "The ammo you issued last week, it was good. Real good." Raquel nodded once, her voice calm. "That's my job." Johnson lingered, his gaze searching for something unspoken. "You hear what happened? Somebody out there saved us. Best shooting I've ever seen." He paused, lowering his voice. "Reminded me of the stories my grandfather used to tell, about guardian angels in combat." Raquel's eyes flickered to his, unreadable. Then she returned to her screen, tapping another line of data. "Glad you made it back," she said simply. Johnson hesitated, then pushed away from the window. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." When he was gone, Raquel allowed herself the faintest smile. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against something hard and smooth. A playing card, the ace of spades. She set it briefly on her desk, the black symbol gleaming under the light. Then she slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and addressed it to Captain Hayes. No return name, no explanation, just a note scrawled in precise handwriting, "Glad you made it home." That evening, Hayes found it under his door. He turned the card in his hand, studying the message. Somewhere on this base, someone had saved them all. Someone who wanted nothing more than silence. He tucked the card into his breast pocket, close to his heart, and said nothing. Outside, the storm eased at last, leaving the air thick with salt and the ground littered with reminders of battle. But among those reminders, a legend had already begun to take root. They would call it the Phantom Storm Engagement. And though no report ever listed her name, those who lived because of her carried the truth in their bones. Here's part 9 of the story, approximately 1,700 words. This is the final act, Raquel's quiet return to duty, the spreading legend of the Phantom Storm and the way her unseen actions ripple forward into the lives of others. Morning broke over the forward base like a reluctant truce. The storm had rolled inland during the night, leaving the coastline slick with salt and rain. Broken clouds drifted across a pale sky, their bellies tinged pink by a sun too shy to shine. The port lay behind them now, scarred and silent, its ruins still smouldering where fire had caught. Falcon Team had been pulled from the field and treated for wounds. Some lay in infirmary beds, stitched and bandaged, their breaths shallow but steady. Others limped through the hallways, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Captain Hayes had already been debriefed twice, his voice hoarse from reliving the firefight. Each time he gave the same answer: unknown sniper, exceptional precision. Without them, we wouldn't be here. He hadn't mentioned the ace of spades tucked into his breast pocket. That belonged only to him. 3 decks below, Raquel Morales returned to her desk as though nothing had happened. Her uniform was crisp, her hair tied back, her expression calm. Stacks of requisition forms waited in neat piles. She logged into the system, fingers dancing across the keyboard. Ammunition counts, vehicle maintenance requests, rations distributed, ordinary numbers for an ordinary role. No one watching her could have guessed she had shaped the course of the battle the night before, that 18 lives, or perhaps more, had been spared because of her. The truth lived only in her body, the ache in her shoulders from holding the Barrett steady, the faint bruises on her cheek from the scope, the quiet fatigue behind her dark eyes, and she intended to keep it that way. By midday, the base hummed with restless energy. Whispers traveled faster than official channels. Men leaned close over meals, recounting the firefight in fragments, the sudden crack of rifle fire cutting through the storm, the enemy sniper silenced before he could strike again. The RPG team dropped just seconds before unleashing devastation. Each retelling grew sharper, more dramatic. The numbers shifted. Some swore it had been 15 shots, others claimed 25. All agreed it had been impossible. They called it divine timing, a young Marine murmured. Who else could hit targets like that in that weather? CIA, another argued. Special Activities Division. I've seen their work. Wrong, someone else countered. That was Delta. No one else has shooters like that, but no one knew for certain. The official after-action report, already circulating through command, listed the mysterious figure as unknown friendly asset. No further details, no signature, no trace. Hayes sat in his quarters that evening, his uniform jacket draped across the back of a chair. The ace of spades rested on the desk before him, its edges curling slightly from damp. He stared at the handwriting, replaying every second of the night. The panic of being pinned, the despair of static filling the radio, the resignation that death was closing in, and then the thunder that had not been thunder, the shots that had carved salvation from the storm. He pressed the card flat against the wood, whispering under his breath, "Whoever you are, thank you." But he knew he would never get an answer. Weeks passed. Falcon Team rotated home to the States, their wounds healing, their spirits buoyed by survival. In bars near Coronado and Norfolk, stories flowed like beer. Operators leaned across tables, their voices low, their words heavy with awe. "Best shooting I've ever seen," Chief Davis told anyone who asked. 18 targets in hurricane winds. Whoever it was, they deserve a medal none of us can give. Speculation grew. Some versions of the tale included helicopters emerging from nowhere. Others insisted the sniper had fired through solid walls, bullets bending with the wind like something out of myth. The core remained unchanged. When Falcon Team called Mayday, someone answered. Back at the forward base, Raquel remained invisible. She processed shipments, balanced ledgers, trained new clerks. When she passed groups of operators, conversations paused. They no longer called her Sniper Girl with mockery. The nickname lingered, yes, but softened, reshaped into something closer to reverence. One evening, a private approached her during weapons inspection. The girl was barely 20, her rifle sling hanging loose against her shoulder. "Staff Sergeant," she asked nervously, "how do you disappear like that? Everyone says you've got this aura, like you're part of the walls." Raquel adjusted the sling, tightening it with a tug. "You don't try to disappear," she said. "You just stop trying to be seen. Focus on the mission. Recognition isn't the goal." The private nodded slowly, eyes wide as though she'd been given a secret. Raquel didn't elaborate. She never did. Months later, the Advanced Marksmanship School added a new case study to its curriculum. They called it the Phantom Storm Engagement. Instructors displayed ballistic charts, weather data, and tactical analysis. Students scribbled notes, shaking their heads at the improbability of it all. 60-knot winds, the instructor explained. Visibility near zero, targets engaged at extended range, multiple angles. 18 confirmed kills, one shooter. The students whispered among themselves, trying to imagine what kind of person could manage such perfection, but no one gave a name. There was no name to give. Meanwhile, in her quarters, Raquel slid open a small wooden box. Inside lay 18 spent casings, each polished until it gleamed. She ran her fingers across them, one by one, as though confirming they still existed. Each brass cylinder represented a heartbeat continued, a family not broken, a future not stolen. This was her true medal. She closed the box and tucked it back beneath her bunk. 6 months after the battle, Hayes received another card. This time it was the 2 of spades, left on his desk after a classified briefing. No one had seen who placed it there. The handwriting was the same, neat and precise. "Stay safe out there." He smiled faintly, sliding it into his wallet beside the ace. 2 cards, 2 reminders that someone unseen was watching. He didn't tell anyone. Some secrets deserved to remain unspoken. Back at the base, Raquel continued her quiet duties. Yet a change had taken root. Young recruits requested assignment to logistics under her. They didn't say why, not out loud, but everyone understood. Legends had a way of spreading even when denied. At night, when the base grew quiet, Raquel returned to her notebook. She filled pages with wind calculations, pressure variations, angles of deflection in different storms. She wasn't preparing for recognition, she was preparing for the next time fate demanded her hand, because there would always be a next time. The Phantom Storm Engagement lived on. In training halls, instructors cited it as proof of what a single rifle could achieve. In bars, operators retold it with embellishments, turning Raquel into a ghost, a phantom, a myth. In the hearts of Falcon Team, it remained something simpler, the reason they had lived to see another sunrise. And for Raquel, it remained what it had always been. Not glory, not legend, not recognition, duty. She walked the base one evening, watching new teams grind through obstacle courses under a fading sun. Their shouts echoed across the compound, filled with youth and fire. She stood at the edge, silent, unseen, her dark eyes calm. She thought of the storm, of the rifle's recoil, of the 18 brass casings in the box beneath her bunk. She thought of the men who had gone home to their families because of her. That was enough. Years later, those who had been there still told the story. Their details changed, their numbers varied, but the truth remained constant. When Falcon Team was trapped, someone they could not see had guided them out. And somewhere on that storm-swept coast, in the memory of thunder and the echo of rifle fire, Raquel Morales had become more than a soldier. She had become the invisible hand that brought warriors home. In the end, survival wasn't marked by medals or by names carved into reports. It was measured in breaths taken, in footsteps leaving the battlefield, in the sound of rotors lifting men out of the jaws of death. Falcon Team lived to fight another day, not because technology or luck intervened, but because one woman refused to sit still when instinct told her something was wrong. Raquel Morales walked back into her role as though nothing had happened. To most, she remained the quiet logistics specialist who moved numbers across paper and stacked boxes in the armory. Yet, to those 12 men, she was something else entirely. She was proof that courage doesn't always announce itself with rank or ceremony. Sometimes it lives in silence, in patience, in the steady pull of a trigger at exactly the right second. The battlefield was washed clean by the storm, but the memory of what happened there never faded. Stories grew, whispered first in barracks, then carried to training schools, then told again in bars and briefing rooms. They called it the Phantom Storm engagement. Some said it was impossible, others swore it had to be supernatural. The men who were saved knew better. They knew it had been skill, discipline, and the unshakable will of someone who asked for nothing in return. And that's the heart of this story. True heroism rarely seeks the spotlight. It acts when action matters most, then disappears back into the shadows, leaving only the echo of lives saved and the gratitude of those who will never forget. If you followed this journey, take a moment to think, how many stories like this go untold? How many heroes stand beside us every day unnoticed, their sacrifices hidden behind the ordinary mask of duty? Here at VeteranBiker, we believe those stories matter. And we want to know what you think. What part of Raquel's mission struck you most? Was it her discipline under fire, her refusal to quit when fatigue clawed at her, or her choice to remain invisible even after saving a team of America's finest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to VeteranBiker so you won't miss the next story of courage, sacrifice, and the warriors who live among us. And if you're ready for more right now, stick around. 2 more incredible videos are waiting on your screen. Thank you for watching. This is VeteranBiker reminding you, sometimes the bravest heroes are the ones we never see.